Hi everyone, I hope you're having a great day. I just want to share with you today some tips, tools, and strategies for coming up with a diet plan or a food plan that fits your unique biochemistry. So just so you guys know, I don't believe in such a thing as a one-size-fits-all diet. And the reason I don't believe in this is because we're all unique. We all have a very specific biochemistry, a unique set of health challenges, and just different foods that our bodies will respond to. Now, that said, I also believe that there's certain principles that God has given us for health and wellness that we need to follow when we're determining what foods we should eat. Now, as most of you guys probably know, GMO foods, genetically modified foods, foods that contain antibiotics and pesticides and hormones are not healthy. These things will mess up your gut microbiome. They'll mess up many other things in your body, your beneficial bacteria, your hormonal balance, and they can be very damaging and destructive to your physical body. Now, if you can't afford organic foods, but even I will say organic foods now also contain some of these toxic substances like pesticides, at the very least, when you buy organic, you're getting a much healthier product. But again, if you can afford organic foods, I would recommend maybe growing your own fruits and vegetables. And there are a lot of things like there are vegetable towers you can buy, like I think one of them is called Rise, another's called Garden, Gardyn. And by the way, I don't receive any financial benefit from recommending these products. I'm just saying that you can actually now grow a garden indoors, and so that's one way that you can get healthy fruits and veggies, or you might join a co-op to get healthy meats. And I believe it's particularly important to consume pasture-raised chicken and beef because these two animals, when they're conventionally raised, they contain a whole lot of things that are really not good for us. Hormones, antibiotics, the stuff that's in their feed, pesticides even. And so what happens is that these conventionally raised animals, they are given hormones to grow at like 3 to 4 times their natural rate. And so, for instance, a cow, which is designed to mature in 4 to 5 years, will actually mature in a year before it's slaughtered. And that's just not healthy. And so conventionally raised chickens and cows they're raised under very inhumane conditions in feedlots where they're crowded, and then they're given a non-native diet, and so foods that they were not designed to eat. And then this causes them to develop infections, and then the farmers have to give them antibiotics so that, because cows, for instance, will develop something called feedlot bloat, and this comes from eating foods that they were not designed to eat. And so as much as possible, I want to encourage you to avoid conventionally raised animal products. And you might choose to try some things like bison or elk or venison. And these animals, because they are wild, they're not fed this same poor diet that cows and chickens are, for instance. Or you might try ostrich or turkey, or again, pasture-raised chickens and cows. And I feel this is really important, you guys. And even when I didn't have a lot of money to spend on just about anything because I was in the throes of chronic illness and I had to rent a cheap apartment, I still ate organic food because I knew it was so important. And I really noticed a difference in my physical health when I did that. So as much as you guys are able, choose organic food. And I also just want to say that even the best organic food in the US is now contaminated to some extent. I still think it's much better than conventionally raised products, but there's a lot of contamination of the food supply now. So another thing you can do is pray over your food. Ask God to make it like the Garden of Eden and remove any contaminants from it. Ask Him to infuse all the nutrients that you need for life into that food. And God can transform that food supernaturally. I really believe it. And I have a friend who worked in the jungles of Peru, and I remember him sharing a story in which he was invited to partake of the natives' food, but it was meat that had been out for days, like out in the warm air. And so he asked God to bless that food, and it should have been toxic and poisonous to him, but his body actually handled it well, and he believes that it was because God had blessed that food and just like removed any poisons or any bacterial growth that may have been on it as a result of not being refrigerated. So bless your food. Again, thank God for it. And when you thank Him for it, I believe this also can transform it. Now, I'm just going to share a few more things with you. And by the way, in my new teaching program, A Top-Down Approach to Healing Spirit, Soul, and Body, which you can get on my website at conniestrassheim.org. So there are all kinds of diets out there. There's the GAPS diet, keto diet, paleo diet, many other diets. And one of these diets may work really well for you. But the diet that I like the best is called the metabolic typing diet. And the reason I like it is because it's very individualized to your body's chemistry. And so the original developer of the metabolic typing diet, William Donald Kelly, he has a questionnaire that you can complete. It takes about 3 hours to do. And when you answer the questions in this questionnaire, it'll end up telling you what foods your body is likely to respond best to based on your chemistry, but also your physical characteristics and some other things that he goes into. And so I really like metabolic typing for that reason. And I felt after I did the test that the recommendations that it gave me were pretty accurate for me. And so if I was going to recommend one type of diet, it would be that. But you also want to look into other things, other factors like your body's pH after you eat a particular food, your body's level. And so your pH is a measure of your body's acid alkaline balance. And you want your body to be, your saliva to be mostly alkaline, not too alkaline, but just balanced. And so you can buy pH strips online. And that's one way you can identify whether a food is healthy for you, but also realize that your body's acid alkaline balance is influenced by stress. And so if you have a lot of stress in your life, you may be acidic even though you're eating all the right foods. But that's one way you can determine whether a food is healthy for you or not. Another way is just simply how you feel after eating that food. If it makes you tired, it's probably not a good thing because you're not supposed to be tired after you eat. Now, if you eat a lot of food, yes, I guess you can get tired. But if you're really tired, if you get grouchy, if your heart races, that's a telltale sign that you just ate something that you were sensitive to. Okay, and a lot of people have food sensitivities these days, especially to genetically modified foods. And wheat is probably the worst because GMO wheat has pesticides engineered into it. And so it's not healthy at all. And if you're battling a complex chronic illness, I want to just say that you probably want to avoid grains. You might do okay with some rice, or a little bit of gluten-free oatmeal or another type of grain. But if you have a neurological disease in particular, or a disease that affects your neurological system, you may want to avoid grains entirely because these tend to be inflammatory to the body. You'll probably do better on a food plan or a diet that includes ample amounts of healthy fats like coconut oil, avocados, olive oil, as well as high amounts or moderate amounts of healthy protein. So that would be like pasture-raised chicken or beef, goat's cheese, or another animal product like elk, venison, buffalo, fish. And by the way, fish is getting very iffy, but if you consume smaller fish like wild-caught salmon, sardines, or herring, those can be okay, but most of the larger fish are pretty contaminated with methyl mercury. So I don't recommend consuming those quite as often, if at all, but moderate amounts of low mercury fish I believe are okay. I've actually almost stopped eating fish entirely, and it's just something that I did naturally because I felt like my body wasn't responding well to it anymore. And I just think, again, it's because of the contamination problem in our environment. And I've actually been eating more game meat lately because I feel like my body really likes that. So anyway, healthy fats, healthy animal protein, and then healthy lower glycemic fruits and vegetables. And lower glycemic means lower sugar fruits and vegetables because even natural sugar can cause inflammation in the brain. And so if you're battling a neurological disease, you probably just want to have foods. The only fruits you might want to eat are berries. If you're a little bit stronger, you might do okay with apples and peaches and fruits that are moderately, they're like kind of in the middle on the glycemic index. But high glycemic fruits like bananas and mangoes and pineapples, I would tend to avoid or just consume every once in a while. But again, it's individual. It depends on the level of challenges that you have, how sick you are, and just what you feel good eating. Some of you might be sitting here going, well, I feel awesome when I eat fruit. And if that's the case, then that's okay. Maybe your body can handle it. But if you're pre-diabetic, if you're battling a neurological disease, I would recommend staying away from higher glycemic foods as much as possible. And so that would even mean things like potatoes and sweet potatoes. And some people do okay with sweet potatoes. I don't, but again, it depends on your chemistry, but vegetables are really usually a good thing, especially non-starchy vegetables, non-starchy greens. You may or may not be able to do nightshade vegetables like eggplants and tomatoes, but again, just experiment to see what works for you. Now, you might be, if you're someone who, let's say you're really sick, you have trouble with your digestion, you may not do well with non-starchy raw vegetables. You may need to cook your vegetables in a stew or a soup. And if that's the case, that's fine. That's great. Some people can only really consume cooked vegetables because they don't have the enzymes or the hydrochloric acid to break down raw veggies in the gut. And so just go with what feels good to you. Go with what gives you energy. And I know when you're sick, sometimes it can be hard to find foods that are really going to benefit you. But I encourage you guys to check out my new teaching course to learn more about that, or a book that I co-authored with Dr. Lee Cowden in 2014 called Foods That Fit a Unique You. And it's just a little small book, but it goes through different things that you want to look at when coming up with a diet plan for your own personal needs. So anyway, in addition to ample amounts of healthy fat, healthy animal protein, vegetables, and low glycemic fruits, I would say have a dessert once in a while. Have a dessert made with stevia or monk fruit or another natural sweetener. But you want to stay away from most products that are in a box or a can, things that have artificial preservatives and additives put into them. And so in general, guys, you want to shop around the perimeter of the supermarket where all the fresh fruits, where all the fresh vegetables and meats are located. And so these are just some general guidelines. And finally, I just want to share with you something that the famous author Michael Pollan said, which is that if your great-grandmother would not recognize it as food, then it's probably not good for you. Think about that. Even your grandmother, depending on how old you are, what did your grandma eat? Did she eat all this processed food that we have for sale today in our supermarkets? Well, probably not. And I know that processed food is sometimes easier to make, it's more convenient, but if you're going to eat food in a box or a can, I encourage you to not make that the staple of your diet. And just use those things once in a while when you don't feel like cooking. But in general, make food fresh from scratch. Buy food that's in the condition in which God created it. And so if it comes from a plant, if it comes from a tree, if it comes from the sea or an animal, chances are it's going to be good for you if it hasn't been extensively manipulated or processed. And so anyway, I hope these guidelines have been helpful for you today. And send me a message if you have any questions. All right, guys, have a great day. I'll talk to you soon.